In this video lesson, I am going to show you how to create a simple Adobe form in an ABAP report. I'm going to create a program called CPR Adobe Form Type Report, and I'm going to use the tables sFlight and SPFLEE in my Adobe form, and I'm going to use the structure ESI Flight Plan Route. All of these tables and structures are standard inside the SAP system. You can create Adobe forms inside the SAP system. You need to test certain configurations inside the system. You have to check the ADS configurations. So to test the ADS configuration in the system, you can run these 4 programs. So you navigate to transaction SE38 and you run each of these programs or reports to test the proper ADS configuration. I run this program, ADS connection, I type ADS, and I leave the rest of the input fields with the values that were shown, and I run the program. I choose an output device, so I'm going to choose the ADS device. You need to configure this output printer before you can use it. If you don't know how to configure it, you can contact your basis team for them to configure it for you. So then I click on Print Preview, and now the Adobe form, a test Adobe form, is printed to the screen. So this ensures that the Adobe form ADS configuration is working okay, and I can print them to the screen. The other program I need to run if I'm getting errors when I try to build my Adobe form is the FP PDF test 00. So once again, I run this program. Connection, I want to test the ADS connection, and you should receive this message. This means the ADS connection is working okay. Now I need to check also the destination service. So I copy my program and I run it, and I test the program for destination service. So I get this message, and this means everything is okay. If you get an error message or another message, you should contact your basis team. And finally, you check the HTTP data transfer. Run my program again, and I should get this message again. This means my system is ready to create Adobe forms. So now I can navigate to transaction SFP. This is the transaction for the Adobe forms. I'm going to write that down here in case you couldn't catch it on the screen. So transaction SFP is for creating Adobe forms. So before I create an Adobe form, I need to create an interface. So I'm going to create a Z interface. So I type in Z in for interface Adobe form, and I click on create. We have different interface types. In this video lesson, I'm going to teach you how to create Adobe forms using the ABAP dictionary based interface. And we can type a description. So this is the interface for Adobe form test, and I save. I choose a package. I'm going to choose the temporary package, or I'm going to save as a local object. And now I have my interface. So inside my interface, I can add import parameters, export parameters, exceptions. I can define global data, types or field symbols, and I can write some ABAP code inside my Adobe form. So for this example, I'm going to use two import parameters. So I double click on import, and then I click on append or insert row. So I'm going to type the car ID parameter, type, and I need the type for this, so I'm going to navigate to my S-Flight table and copy the data element. And I'm going to add another parameter, the import con ID parameter, type, and I navigate one more time to the data element type. And we want them to always be sent. We want these parameters to be obligatory, so we don't check this optional flag. And now on my global data, I'm going to add another variable name that is going to be called global structure flight data, and it's going to be type the type that we talked previously, this type. And now I'm going to save my interface. So now in my code initialization, I'm going to add my input parameters and my output parameters. So my input parameters, I'm going to use the car ID that I previously defined, and the con ID that I previously defined, so I can use it in my ABAP code. And on my output parameters, this is going to be the parameters that are going to be shown on screen in the Adobe form. I'm going to write the global structure flight data, and I'm going to save. So the idea is that in our Adobe form, we're going to receive two parameters, the con ID and the car ID. And with these IDs, we're going to process them in the Adobe form, writing some ABAP code in this section. And then after the process is done, we're going to output to the Adobe form or to the screen some flight data information. So let's write some ABAP code. So I'm going to declare some local variables here. Local variable sFlight, or let's call it better local structure, ls sFlight, type the sFlight table, and I also want the sbfleet structure, type sbfleet table. So I'm going to select single everything from the sFlight table into the corresponding fields of my local structure sFlight, where the car ID equals my import parameter car ID and my con ID equals my con ID parameter. And I'm going to perform another select single from the SP table into the corresponding fields of ls SP where the car ID equals the car ID and the con ID equals my input parameter. Once I have these two parameters, I'm going to transfer the values to my output parameter or to my global structure flight data. So I'm going to perform a move corresponding my local structure as flight to my GS flight data structure. And I'm also going to perform a move corresponding my SP structure data to my global structure. So I save, I check my syntax, and I activate my interface. So this is the interface for our Adobe form. In the interface we can process any ABAP code and any business logic we want to do. Now, once we have our interface created and active, we are going to create our Adobe form. So we go back and I click on form, and I'm going to create my ZAF_Adobe form. So I choose create. Remember to copy the interface, you need this name. So I create my Adobe form and I need to specify an interface. So I put down the interface that I just created. So this is Adobe form test for flights. And I save my form. I save it as a local object. Now, as you can see in my global data, I have my structure that I defined in my interface. As an import parameters, I have my con ID and my car ID. So I want to display in my Adobe form my global data or my global structure. So I drag and drop my structure to my Adobe form. So first I need to save. Now I can select all the fields that I'm going to use. On my Adobe form. So I can drag and drop my structure into my Adobe form. So I can design my layout based on my global structure. So I click my structure and I drag and drop inside my context. So now I'm going to have available all these fields to use when I'm designing the layout of my Adobe form. So I save and I go to my layout tab. I'm getting an error, so I double click and as you can see I'm getting that I cannot use this field and distance field. So I'm going to remove them. So I right click and I click on deactivate this ID, and I'm sorry, I can use this one. This one is okay. Set to active. And I cannot use this one and the distance. Apparently there's a problem with the structure, so I'm just going to deactivate for now. Normally you can create your own C structures and use them in these Adobe forms, so you don't get this type of problems. And now I'm getting a language error. Now, I'm getting this language error because my system was configured and prepared in the Portuguese language, and I'm logging in the English language so you can understand better where I click. But now I have to log off and log in using the Portuguese language. But in your system, it's going to be the same, except it's going to be in Portuguese. So I save and I log out. Okay, so one more time I log back in the system using the original configuration language, that it was the Portuguese language, and now I can click on my layout and design my Adobe form. So click on layout, and now I am inside the tool for designing your Adobe form. So I want to use the fields that I declare on my global structure. So I click on data visualization, and then here I have my global structure that I defined and all my fields. So I want to use all of my global structure. So I drag and drop into my Adobe form. I'm going to drag and drop one more time into my Adobe form all of my fields. So now I'm going to print all of these fields into my Adobe form. You can play with the different properties the Adobe Form Designer tool has for you. So for example, you can play with the border, the layout, the object. This is very important. The object tab is where you define the binding between the fields in the screen and the fields in your program. So for example, the binding for this field, I can see it here. So the binding is related to my global structure flight data and specifically to the car ID field. So everything that is filled in the program in the car ID field is going to show up in this field in the Adobe form. So the binding is really important to transfer data from the program to the report or the Adobe form. You can even preview your Adobe form by clicking on Preview PDF. Remember that you need to install in your system the Adobe Reader. If you don't install the Adobe Reader, you are not going to be able to preview your Adobe form. So I can preview my Adobe form in this case. As you can see, I can type into the fields in the Adobe form, but I don't want that. For this report, we only want to display the information in the report. So we're going to make these fields read only. So I go back to my project tab, So back in the project tab, we want to make these fields read-only. So I click on the field, I click on the object tab, and on the type I select lecture only, the last option. So I do that for all of my fields. This way I cannot type anything inside the form and modify it. Adobe interactive forms can use to be sent to a user, and the user can type information and then send it back to the client. But in this case, we don't want to type anything inside the form. We just want to print it out. So I save and I activate my form. If I get that window, just click on cancel. You shouldn't get this window if you had the right configuration of the ADS in your system, but because I changed the language from Portuguese to English, I'm getting this logon pop-up window. So once we have our form active and our interface active, we can go ahead and create the program to call our form and print it to the screen or print it to a printer. Once you have your Adobe form active and with the design you want, and you played with the different properties that the Adobe form designer brings to you, let's go back and build a small program to test our Adobe form and our interface logic. So let's go back and let's go to transaction SE38. So let's build the program ZPR Adobe form test, and we go ahead and click on create. This is going to be the program to test Adobe forms, and it's going to be an executable or type report program, and we save the program as a temporary or as an local object. So in our program, we're going to write down this code to call up our Adobe form. So I have the code prepared for you in this separate notepad. So I'm going to copy everything. And I'm going to paste it in my program. Now I'm going to scroll down slowly so you can go ahead and pause the video and copy this into your program. So first we declare a selection screen with two parameters. That's going to be the car ID and the con ID. So we choose which car ID and con ID we want to print in our Adobe form. And on the start of selection we declare some variables. The form, for example, is going to be the name of our Adobe form. So we type in capital letters the name of our form. So that would be, in my case, Adobe form 3, because I did 3 Adobe forms. But in your case, it's going to be just Adobe form. So type the name of your Adobe form in this value, and then just copy and paste the rest of the code as it is in the video. I'll try to place the code in the comments below. So you type the function fp_job open. Then you type the function model to retrieve the name of the function model generated for our Adobe form. I'm going to comment this message here. I'm just going to exit. If there's a problem, I'm just going to write message. There was a problem with the function model name. Type E. And then I exit. Let's type S, display like E, so we don't have problem locking down the screen. Then we need to send some language and country settings to the function model generated. So I just assign language and my country, selecting it from this table, and I send it to this structure, which I use to call the function generated in this step. In this generated function model, I'm going to send my parameters. Remember, we have two important parameters in our interface. This is the function model generated for our interface. So I'm going to send the car ID and the con ID. And I'm going to send the parameters in the screen. So I send to my interface the parameter I typed for the car ID and the parameter I typed for the con ID. And then I just write down the FP job close function model to close the spool job. So go ahead and copy all this code. And once you have it, just save, check, and activate the program. Now we're ready to run the program and test our Adobe form. But first, let's change the parameters text. Remember the selection screens, text element. Remember, I have it in Portuguese, but you can use it in English. So this is going to be the carrier ID and the flight ID. I activate my text elements. Go back. Now I'm ready to test my program.